I'm Sheelika Ravishankar from TeamIndus and very happy to be, as Tom said, in my second Global Innovation Forum. Innovation is what takes us into the future, but I believe the difference between where we can be and where we are as a nation, as a race, as people, is imagination. Without imagination, there is no innovation. Now, breakthrough imagination is often considered to be unfathomable, maybe even unreasonable, certainly crazy at bits and points of life. But if you look at events that changed our world, changed the way we think, changed the way we look at it, it always is embedded in some kind of unreasonable thought or some kind of craziness. My topic today is building of a moonshot, and I'm going to talk about a team that is unreasonable, maybe even stubborn in realizing the potential of its imagination, and whether that's foolhardy or that's going to be something that changes the world is something that the future will tell us. There are many events that have changed our world, many events after which the world was never the same. And while I'm going to show you a few of them, and these are certainly not representative of every event or every important event that's changed our world, these are the ones I've picked, which span over society, technology, audacity, and a step into the future. This was, can we have the volume gone? No volume. This was proof that man could stand together in unity and solidarity in the face of divisive forces, especially something we need right now. The mobile phone changed the way we look at technology. Could you pause it a second? Because I just want to talk about that. The mobile phone changed the way we live today to the extent that some of us are dependent on Google Maps to find our way home. I certainly am. This is solar panel. This is the audacity of one man who believed that he could make the future of better technology, drove his solar-powered plane across the world, capturing the imagination of millions along the world. Did anyone watch him when he stopped here? No? Okay. Can we play, please? And of course, there is Elon Musk. Any space enthusiasts here? Did anyone see the landing of those rockets when they came and landed back on Earth? Gives me goose flesh still, and is certainly a step into our future. Now, whether a Tesla with a spaceman orbiting space somewhere in it is unreasonable, crazy, or just silly, I'm going to leave that up to your opinion and not have something to say there. So how does Elon landing rockets back on Earth change the world as we see it? It doesn't in itself. It's a step towards a future which is inevitable. Earlier this year, Dr. Stephen Hawking re-predicted, saying we have only 100 years left on this Earth. 100 years in which we have to find a new planet, develop technologies around it, and colonize it if you have to save the human species. Please remember, in the last 50 years, we've done nothing to explore space at all. NASA is the world's pioneering science research organization, and they have also woken up after 50 years to the fact that we would need to habitat other planets, and have launched their lunar habitat in 2030. There's an association called the Moon Village Association. It has people from all over the world who've come together to analyze the cultural, societal, technological impact of the first village on the moon. This is inevitable. This is what our future is going to be. We're going to wake up one day and realize that we have to be a multi-planetary species to survive. The United Launch Alliance in America has launched something called the Cislunar 1000. These are 1,000 people, the first 1,000 people who are going to survive in a cislunar iconosphere. So what's a cislunar iconosphere? It's the space between the Earth and the moon is called the cislunar space. We all know about how lower Earth orbit is commercialized. You have Elon, who has suddenly made rocket launches so much more accessible, so much more cheaper that other people can use it more often. Rocket Labs just launched a rocket launcher for smaller spacecrafts. You have commercial satellites which are becoming smaller and smaller in size, CubeSats, which give you services like communication, direct to home, weather monitoring, all of that happening. There's an ISS, which is the first habitat which is out of Earth and in the orbit that has existed there. Where we are today, if we are to take this forward, is in the cislunar space, the space between Earth and Moon. That is the space that we need to create and have enough in-space resources that it can survive on its own. So what do I mean by in-space resources? Generating its own fuel, printing its own hardware, everything happening there itself without a dependency to come back to Earth. It's only when that space, the cislunar space, has fully evolved can you actually look at deep space exploration. You do have some missions that go, we've launched for Mars, we've launched beyond the universe, but if you actually want to colonize, to move forward, to actually go and search for other habitats, you would have to have the cislunar space completely done first. Now, I'm sure some of you, and I can see some skeptic faces here saying, under which rock has she climbed out of? We're not going anywhere. But the space economy is an integral part of our world today. It's a $350 billion annual industry. It's growing exponentially. It's the fastest growing industry today. It is an industry which was looking to build in-space resources, and that is a huge boom too. The fourth industrial revolution will have space delivering communication, IoT, all kinds of services to Earth. But the question is, can this in-space economy, the in-space resources that I talked about in the cislunar economy, can it create economic value? Can it create jobs here? Could be, whether it's space tourism, exploration, building of infrastructure, planetary science. There's a whole wide opportunity there to create value. Anyone who's a time traveler would not have experienced this, but otherwise, we've all looked at collaborative consumption models. Everyone's either used an Uber or stayed at an Airbnb. Some of these resources are resources which could not be accessible to people otherwise at the cost that they're accessible today. Most industries have benefited from a collaborative consumption model. The explosion in growth that these kind of companies have seen is what is needed to grow space. Space will have to look at creating a model by which regular folks like you and me can be part of this industry. Prohibitive costs, national security, military restrictions, these are all kinds of things that make us think that space is for nations. It's for people who are scientists. There's no role for the average human being to be a part of space. But this is where the industry is today. We're going to create a way for everyone to be part of this. TeamIndus is looking to see how we can build enough capacity, enough payload capacity to take from the Earth to the Moon, which brings the cost down by an order of magnitude, which enables any person to be part of this. So if you're a planetary scientist, or if you're a company that wants to test its future technology in space, communication, health, any of that, if you want to test that in space, we're going to make that accessible to everyone. The aim of TeamIndus is to democratize space to such an extent that we truly believe space is for everyone. So I'm going to share the story of a startup that was born out of the imagination of a few people that's now set up to fly to the Moon and potentially be the first ever privately funded space exploration mission in the world. In my journey of these last many years with TeamIndus, I have been consistently told space is for rich people. Private space is only if you're a Jeff Bezos and you can throw $1 billion every year to develop your company. So what makes folks like us, the founders of TeamIndus, none of us have an aerospace background. None of us have deep pockets for sure. And if anyone saw our financials right now, you'd know that for sure. What makes us think we could enter an industry like this and survive? Imagination usually has a mix, right? Either it's something that you dreamt of as a child, and I'm sure everyone I met throughout all the talks I gave always said, Now, when I was young, I thought I'd be a physicist when I grew up. I certainly wanted to be an astronaut, but I thought I'd be a pilot that takes me to space. We all have these dreams that are somewhere romantically linked to space. Or you have a spark that comes your way. For me, it was in India. On Sundays at 9 a.m., they would play Star Trek. And every Sunday, no matter what I did, I watched Star Trek and genuinely believed that there would be a time when a Scotty equivalent would beam me up. And then I grew older and realized that was not happening. And sometimes TVs make you think the world is true, but it's not. But now we're back to a place, and I finally believe that we're back to a place where the next generations will be able to look at it and say, maybe we could be beamed up one day. So for me, it was Star Trek. For most of the founders, we're all the same age, grew up when Star Trek came on TV. It was that, and it was an opportunity that came knocking in terms of the Google Lunar XPRIZE. The Google Lunar XPRIZE was a competition that was launched in 2007 by XPRIZE and sponsored by Google. It required privately funded teams to build and land a spacecraft on the moon. It had to move 500 meters, and it had to send images back to Earth as evidence of doing so. There were 29 teams from across the world. We are the only team from India. And we were the last entrants and the forerunners to win this. The reason Google Lunar XPRIZE happened was because there was a need to commoditize space, because there was a need to take it out of the restrictive grasp of space agencies of nations and bring it to something that came out to regular folks. When I first put up this slide, I put it up in 2011. And I said, TeamIndus is flying a privately funded spacecraft to the moon. And this is a feat that has been accomplished by only 2 countries in the world, the Americans and the Russians in the 60s and 70s. In 2013, I edited this slide to add China. But I've been using the same slide since 2013, and we are still potentially the first private enterprise to fly to the moon. No other nation country has done this except for these 3, and America and Russia haven't been back since then. Only China has been back since the 70s to the moon. This is what we are building. So our mission has 3 parts to it. On the far right, you see the rocket launcher. That's what someone like Elon Musk would build, or nations, space agencies. So NASA has a rocket launcher, ESA has a rocket launcher, India has a rocket launcher. And then there's the spacecraft and the rover. The spacecraft is what does the journey from Earth to moon, and the rover is an exploratory platform that goes through the surface of the moon. So how does that happen? The rocket launcher will take us to that little edge next to the Earth. It's a 20-minute ride. That's all it does. It helps you break away from Earth's gravity. And then our spacecraft does a 14-day journey from Earth to moon before it gets captured in the lunar surface and starts its descent. Descent is the most critical part of our mission because how many countries have landed on the moon?
3.
Only 3. You've heard this before.
Sure.
Only 3. And that is something that there is no technology available. So when we were building this mission, and we could do, because India has been to the moon before, it hasn't just landed, we could get some help and some data from Indian scientists. We went to Lockheed and said, you guys have landed on the moon because we're not going to understand anything the Russians have done. Can you help us? And they said, oh, that was 50 years ago. So we don't have anything documented. And the people who've done that are gone, which is why today, if America has to do this themselves again, they have to start from scratch. The knowledge is not there anymore, and it hasn't been documented properly. So that is the trickiest part of our mission. It's a 15-minute, completely autonomous landing, which takes us from a 1.7 kilometers per second to 0 velocity in those 900 seconds. After we land during dawn because our rover is solar paneled. So it gets power from the sun. Our entire operation is 1 lunar day. How many Earth days? I ask and nobody usually knows. It's really sad because that's third grade science. One lunar day, how many Earth days? 14. One lunar day is 14 Earth days, and that's how we have a fortnight. Yes. So our mission on the moon is for 14 Earth days, because that's how long we will survive. We can't survive the night, because to do a night survival on the moon needs nuclear power, and no matter how open this industry is becoming, they're not giving us nuclear power anytime soon. So this is the spacecraft that we have built in Bangalore. This has been fully tested. It's been qualified. Potentially, this is ready to fly to the moon today. When we do fly, we will build a flight version of this. But in terms of every equipment, avionics, everything, this can fly today. These are some of the tests that we do. So on the right-hand corner, you'd see how we test the legs of the spacecraft and how does it take the impact of the last landing. Similarly, in the bottom right-hand corner. These two on the left hand is about the rover. So if you look at your cars can go over an obstacle of half the radius of its wheel. That's how most cars are built. The rover can do it for the entire radius. It's built in such a way, it's got something called a rock cradle arm, that any given point of time, no matter what the obstacle or the crevice, all four wheels are always on the ground, because it's not like we can send someone there to straighten it if it falls back. So there's a lot of work that we've done on this rover. This rover will be the first of its kind 6 kg rover on the moon. The rovers which the Russians and the Americans sent were anything above 650 kgs. The rover that the Chinese sent was 150 kgs. So having a 6 kg rover came with its own complexities, its own challenges, which took us a really long time to build, retest. We've built these simulated lunar surfaces in our facility, and that's how we test it. We use helium balloons to account for gravity and test every wheel out there. So this is how we will increase capacity and reduce the cost. The image you see on the far right, that is the spacecraft in our facility in Bangalore today, and that's the one that will fly. The rest of them are all built on the same platform. So that gives us economies of design, economies of scale, economies of being able to negotiate for the tanks, being able to negotiate for the propellant. And that's where we would save tremendous amount of money. I'm always asked out here to say, great, you're building so much capacity, and 600 kgs right up to 900 kgs, 2 tons in the next 4 to 5 years to the moon. Who's going? Who will buy all of this payload space? And I'm sure some of you are asking to say, where is the business model here? Who is actually going to pay for this? NASA is the biggest consumer. So NASA is already ready to sign up on the first mission and will continue to sign up as it goes along. NASA has to do 30 to 40 missions at least before it does the human habitation on the moon. Space engineering companies, everybody wants to test something on space before you can use it back on Earth, test different facilities out there. Planetary scientists, we have on our first mission 7 planetary scientists that have already signed up to test a smaller experiment, because our space is restricted, it's only 50 kgs, with the commitment of taking bigger experiments in the second one and the third one. Because there's one element to say I can send something to test today, but if I know I can test it over the next 4 years, it helps me take the data, build on that, and then resend it back to test each time. If any of you work in organizations that are building technologies for the future, communication, monitoring, security, any of that, you'd like to send your stuff aboard our payload to get tested either in space or on the moon. And we've reduced prices, and I'll give you all discounts today if you want to send something immediately. How do you go from a team like us? So none of the founders, like I said, had any aerospace background. How do you go from a eclectic set of 4 or 5 people with no aerospace background to a team that's building the world's first space exploration mission? you just employ the best team in the world. Nirmal is the first employee that we had. He came to us in 2011, straight out of college from one of the best institutes in India, and said, I don't care, you have money, you have a company, you pay me or not, I'm going to build a mission that goes to the moon. We've built our team to 120 people from there. And the secret sauce we have is we have some of the brightest young engineers from institutes all over the world, and we mix them with retired scientists from the Indian Space Research Agency. So they are the ones who guide, they are the ones who head each of those subsystems. I think it's the magic solution we've had, because we take the energy, the new way of thinking, the new learning of the young team, and marry it with the experience, the little more traditional thought of the older ones, and that gets us to move this fast. It's been only since 2011 that we incorporated. 2011 went in thinking, oh my God, what have we done? And Googling on Google saying, how do you build a spacecraft, which didn't yield any results in case you wanted to do that. 2012 is when we started knocking on doors. 2013 is when we actually started building this mission. So it's been 5 years since we've come this far. What we've also done is, our mandate is to make space accessible to all. So we've looked at opportunities by which we can engage people across the world. We had a competition that allowed students from across the world to build a small experiment which could go aboard the spacecraft and get tested. We have one team from here, from London, from the University of Bath. They are sending a small experiment which looks at lunar domes and creates habitats on the moon. We have 8 such experiments that are flying on there. In India, we have a bus that travels to the remotest and most rural areas of India to underprivileged children and talks to them about science and STEM. And I'll take a second to just explain that. I visited the bus in one rural area, and when we were there, we have an antenna. The ISS passed over us, so they could hear the astronauts speaking. The wonderment in those eyes to say, my God, if there are people in the sky who live there and can speak, what can I do here on Earth? And I think that bus has a lot of impact. What we've also looked at, in case you're not a student and you don't want to be part of our experiments, is how do we make space interesting for you? So in our command centers, and we have these we're going to have these command centers across the world. If anyone wanted to come and experience what does it feel like to be walking on the moon, we're building a virtual reality software. This is JPL's Curiosity. With this software, it's used by geologists to actually analyze the Mars surface. We're building exactly something like this, so then when our rover's on the moon, you get to see everything that our rover's doing. There are 40 such screens that we have during the mission. We're going to take the effort to teach everyone, why does this happen? What's an uplink? What's a downlink? What happens if one engine fails? Why do we leave it autonomous? Why are we doing a burst of engine right now? When do you slow and accelerate? So we'll teach you how to become, maybe not a mission director, but a wannabe rocket scientist for sure. And the most exciting thing is that we're going to let people drive the rover when it's on the moon. So if you're a race car enthusiast and you'd like to drive the rover on the moon, this is the slowest rover in the history of mankind. So I just give you that as an update. So these are ways of us bringing space closer and more interesting to people. I'm going to borrow heavily from Carl Sagan here. And I don't know if any of you all have seen his video, The Pale Dot, Pale Blue Dot, anyone? So borrowing from him again, everyone who's created history in this world, everyone from a monarch to a slave, everyone from the most renowned artists to the best work, the most renowned piano players, every Nobel Prize winner, you, me, everyone you love, everyone your children love, everybody exists on that one pale blue dot, which is hanging on a dust speck in a sunbeam. Look at the distance. This is a real photograph, and that small little arrow there is the Earth. We sometimes live in the delusion that we're very important as as a race, we're very important as a species, but we are just a small dot in that massive universe. So think about it to say, where can your imagination take you? Thank you.